Are you seeking a better way to accelerate your sales, to scale your business, to live a life with no limits? Accelerate Sales Podcast features global experts who have cracked the code to recurring revenues with proven sales systems and get you on the fast track to scaling. Now let's accelerate your sales with today's episode.
Welcome to the Accelerate Sales Podcast. Today, we've got an amazing guest. You're going to learn three key things. One is the ecosystem and the role partnerships play in that ecosystem. We're obviously talking about the tech ecosystem. The second is the top three players and how Microsoft is gaining share and why it's gaining share and what to look for when selecting the right vendor to partner with. If you're a first-time listener, please subscribe if you like the show. If you're a regular, love those reviews on the platform that you're listening to. By all means, take notes, but we also have a great short summary in the app that you're listening to. We've got a more detailed summary within the website, which is paulhigginsmentoring.com/podcast. And then you can always get the full transcript if you like, just by going to that page. And before we go to the interview with Vince, I'd like to thank our sponsors. So the first one is the Cloud Consultants Collective. So it's a free Slack community of like-minded peers across multiple SaaS platforms, all helping each other to scale. So you can just go to the cloudconsultantscollective.com. And the next is SendSpark. You know, video is becoming so much more important. I now do this video and also audio. So if you ever want to watch the video, you can go to YouTube. They're all there under Paul Higgins Mentoring. But what about in the sales process? And what you can do is send brilliant little videos with GIFs. And also you can use some really clever ways to scale but still personalize it. And the platform's called SendSpark, and you can get 6 months free at paulhigginsmentoring.com/SendSpark. So our guest today is Vince Menzione, and he's an award-winning business leader who's delivered and advanced four successful business transformations, including almost a decade as the GM at Microsoft, running a $4.6 billion, that's with a B, partner business by embracing disruptive technology and building successful partnerships to transform businesses. As the CEO of Ultimate Partnerships, Vince has this 30 years of experience. He doesn't look that old. 30 years of experience to have a set of proven principles and guides technology organizations towards maximizing their business results by applying these proven principles and a framework to get partnerships right, to optimize for success and deliver results. And if you stay to the end, he actually gives you what those 7 principles are and guide. He's also runs a successful podcast himself. I mentioned several times in this podcast, I never miss it. It's the Ultimate Guide to Partnership, where he spotlights all leaders and partnership principles to help technology orgs thrive through this time of rapid transformation. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Vince Menzione from Ultimate Partnerships. Welcome, Vince.
Paul, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me today.
It's great to have you here. As we were saying in the preamble, I listened to all of your podcasts on the Ultimate Partnership, or the Ultimate Guide to Partnerships, I should say. I love your podcast. I love what you do in the industry. So very, very excited to have you here today. But why don't we kick off with you telling us who you love to work with and what are some of the problems that you love to solve for them?
So I am passionate about partnerships, no surprise. I grew up in the sales world. I carried a bag, learned very quickly that I'd get further with partners. Might not get there as fast, but I'll get further with partners. And I've worked at Microsoft and I've helped a lot of organizations. My favorite clients right now are independent software vendors. The SaaS economy is exploding. I just saw a recent study had us at about 368,000 global ISVs, independent software vendors. Wow. And I find that a lot of these organizations are still struggling working with the tech giants and working with the hyperscalers. and are coming at it maybe without a true understanding of what makes successful partnerships. So that's where I focus. Those are my favorite clients.
Yeah, brilliant. And what are some of the problems? Like you said, it's getting to those tech giants, but a little more specifically, what are some of the things that you really help them solve?
Well, we still live in a world from a sales world where the CRO in many organizations thinks about hiring, another 10 or 20 sellers and smiling and dialing. And
Yes.
we put a lot of science around marketing, but we haven't put the science of attribution as much so on partnerships and really measuring the success. And we all know intuitively, and we believe that partnerships can help drive scale, reach, effectiveness in terms of closing business and the like. And a lot of these organizations know intuitively that they want to work with the tech giants. You just saw some of the earnings reports here in the United States. Microsoft was on top of the three hyperscalers this past quarter. So a lot of these organizations they know intuitively they want to work with the tech giant. They may not have the right skills. They may not be aligned the right way or have the right set of expectations. And we come in and help these organizations align for success, optimize for success, and deliver the greatest results.
Yeah, brilliant. And just on Microsoft itself, it sort of went a little bit out of favor. And like you said, now it's more than back in favor. What do you think's brought some of that success?
I give a lot of credit to Satya Nadella. It wasn't alone. I think the momentum was there, but I was there during the Satya Nadella years, and before that, the Steve Ballmer years. And I saw a great shift in terms of culture, in terms of what I'll refer to as the growth mindset. Satya instilled a new growth mindset into the business. No longer was it competing against everyone. It was partnering with a lot of organizations that were potentially competitors in the past. Certainly the rise of the cloud and Azure, Microsoft continued to make significant investments. Satya came from that business and understood, poured in billions and billions of dollars a year in building data centers, building sovereign clouds in many parts of the world, which I think Microsoft took the lead on quite candidly, and going to a lot of these governments that maybe weren't comfortable with an American company with the Patriot Act, having the data reside in the US. And so really worked hard on the development. And then where Microsoft really has always excelled, many years ago, they used to say you don't get fired for buying IBM. Well, you really don't get fired for buying Microsoft, right? Microsoft on the desktop in many parts of the world is the gold standard. Office is the gold standard across businesses. And so Microsoft had to reach into the customers. And intuitively from its onset, making PCs and delivering PCs or software for PCs back in the early days, intuitively knew and built a strong partner ecosystem, probably the strongest of the large ecosystems out there. And so it's ingrained in the culture of Microsoft. And so there's I believe, a greater opportunity to develop a very strong co-selling relationship with and through Microsoft for these SaaS software companies.
Yeah, and just talk about the partner ecosystem, and for most of you listening or watching now, you're selling a SaaS software, so it's a little bit below. It's a different style of partnership because you're the end person on the ground, making sure that the customer gets a result from the implementation of the software. Why people always talk about Microsoft's number one. I think the return on you'll tell me the right number, but I think it's like 9 times or something like it. It's exceptional. Why is that? Why is Microsoft? You said it's in their DNA, but what else? Well, what makes Microsoft Partner Network so good?
Well, first of all, in terms of ecosystems, let's talk about ecosystems because it's a word that's really getting a lot of buzz lately. Accenture did a study, and they interviewed CEOs in every industry and every geography, and those CEOs said that their businesses were going to be unrecognizable in 5 years. And it was because of ecosystems and partnerships.
Yeah.
And so the transformation that we've seen the last couple of years has been, our lives have changed dramatically. Our world has changed. And technology has been the driving force, right? It's not as relevant to necessarily have to meet in person all the time. Sure, we'd love to be in person. We're getting digitally fatigued at this point, but we don't have to. We've realized that telemedicine, shopping, education, all these things we've been able to deliver transformatively, digitally. And so that technology has been the driver. But this concept of ecosystems, like you will go further with more, because customers are making decisions today the way we as consumers have made decisions, right? You're going to get a new vehicle. You might call 5 friends and ask them what they think of that particular vehicle before you make your decision. IT buyers and line of business buyers who are making decisions, technology purchases, are doing the same thing. They're relying on the other organizations that they work with. So there are influence decision makers. There are reseller decision makers. There are systems integrators that help cobble together a set of solutions to solve a whole issue for an organization. All of these organizations have some degree of impact in this buying decision process. So for these organizations that want to come into an ecosystem like Microsoft, that's exactly what it is. It's an ecosystem, and recognizing that partnerships of all types may be impactful to your success and driving your success. Co-selling is a notion that maybe 5 or 6 years ago wouldn't have been as strong as it is today.
Yeah, and what's your version or current version of co-selling? What's it mean to you?
It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The strictest definition is we lock arms, we walk hand in hand into the account, and we sell it together, right? That's the strictest definition, but it can mean a lot of different things. Co-selling could be co-branding. For instance, if I'm working with the tech giant, just the simple fact that we've done a press release together talking about the great solution that we deliver together in market. Yes, we do that together. That helps drive demand for our solution. So MQLs, right? It might be that we did some type of joint initiative. We did some type of event together where we generated demand for our solutions together. Or it might be that I have a solution and I'm trying to get in front of a customer. You own the customer relationship and help remove the blockers for me, or help accelerate my success by telling the customer, in fact, giving credibility and providing a level, because you have a trusted relationship, providing a level of credibility to my sales process. So it can be any of those things.
Yeah, great. And what's a good example that you can publicly mention that you've been involved in lately?
Oh my goodness. I mean, so many, right? But I remember one instance in particular where we had a very significant opportunity. We had a technology buyer, chief technology officer, major academic institution, who brought in Microsoft because they thought Microsoft was going to say they should buy the other guys, that we were competing with another company. And Microsoft got up and said, no, this company is the right company. They're the ones we stand behind. They have modernized and built and stayed with us and aligned their technologies and have the better solution. And that flipped the sale. The sale for this buyer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And if you look for when you're looking for the partners, so when Microsoft, for example, is looking for the right partner, what are some of the things they look for?
Well, commitment is super important. Right? I talk about some of the aspects, and we'll talk about this, what I call the 7 habits or the 7 principles of what makes successful partnering. But executive commitment, right? It can't be transactional. Microsoft wants to know that organizations that they're working with are in it for the long haul. Yeah. That in fact, that they are committed. They recognize that we live in a heterogeneous world. And so in many cases, some of these organizations are also working with Amazon or Google or Salesforce, or whoever the other competitor might be in a given instance and workload. But they want to understand that for this situation, we are committed to it together. We've locked arms. We have a shared vision for success, and we're focused on driving that together. So those are the principles around that.
Yeah.
So that's what they look for back. They want to see reciprocity. Yes. They want to see that you're not just trying to take my clients, that there's, and you're in it for me. And then also that this shared vision and value means that there's also what's in it for me as well as Microsoft, because they have to drive cloud consumption. They have to drive adoption of their technologies and so on. And they have a very crisp scorecard that everyone in the organization is measured against at Microsoft.
Yeah. And if you look, you look back at some of the big players like you mentioned then, Salesforce, Microsoft, like how do you see the competing landscape and, however far you can look out, it might be the next, 3 years, it could be the next 10 years. Like where do you see each of them getting their competitive advantage ultimately?
Well, they all came at it from a different perspective, right? So, certainly arguably Salesforce was the first SaaS software company by far.
Yeah.
Amazon came at it from swipe a credit card and do an online transaction like a shopper would. So really they were distanced from the customer, but they got the early adopters in the IT segment because they were the first to market and they had a 3-year lead on everyone else. Google came at it from advertising. So their back-end engines and systems are really optimized around search, and they arguably have some of the best technology. But they also didn't have a direct sales organization, right? They were an advertising model. And then Microsoft has been at this for 40 plus years in a world where they were delivering software to boxes, right, with PCs. And somebody had to do that, right? Somebody had to take the software and load it onto a PC and maybe hook it up to a printer, then a network, then the cloud, and so on. And so they've built this ecosystem around resellers, around systems integrators, around independent software vendors, around partners of all types, learning partners and the like. And so they've built this 450,000, this massive partner ecosystem. And so the whole organization is orchestrated around that. And the others have had to engineer it in afterwards, right? Yes. Amazon didn't have an enterprise sales organization. They had to go build one. Arguably, they've taken a lot of people from organizations like Microsoft and the like to go do that. Same thing with Google. Now Google's playing catch up, right? So you look at the market share, Amazon still is the market leader with about 33 to 35% market share. Microsoft gained a couple points this last year, going from about 20 to 23%. And Google's in the single digits, somewhere in the 5, 6, 7 range in terms of percentage of market share. And then there's everybody else, right? Yes. There's everybody else. Salesforce is at a different angle because they're coming at it from an application perspective. So they've done a good job there. They seem to be driving their growth through acquisition, though, more so than just organic growth, the way you see from the other three.
Yeah, and I've heard that there's going to be more and more consolidation at the moment, because I think from a MarTech perspective, I think there's 9,400, and that, obviously is going up every day. Yes. But there's lots and lots of small players, and I know you deal with some of those small players to get to the tech giants. But what's your view at the moment on consolidation of some of these smaller vendors by the large?
Oh, there's quite a bit of consolidation happening right now in the Microsoft world. In fact, I've had a guest on who helps organizations sell their companies for millions. Linda Rose, she's been an excellent guest on my podcast. But yeah, what Microsoft and the industry tends to act as a forcing function here, right? Microsoft just recently announced a few different things, but one of the things they announced was a new partner program. So Rodney Clark, who's been a guest on my podcast, will be back again actually in a couple of weeks. Rodney's the channel chief at Microsoft. Yeah. And he's just introduced this new partner program that is requiring organizations to reach certain thresholds, right? You need to have certain competencies. You need to invest in a certain amount of resources. You have to, they're raising the bar. And what that's going to force some of the other organizations to get acquired or organizations to gobble up. And we're starting to see this more and more. There's the efficiencies of scale that come with that, right? Or just the inability to operate independently any longer. Yes. We've been seeing it for quite some time. We continue to see it accelerating, and we'll continue to see that happening.
Yeah, and marketplaces. So there's been, some discussion around marketplaces will somehow replace some of what the direct sales is happening within industry. How do you sort of see that playing out?
Some people will say that marketplaces will become the channel. I've had guests on my podcast talk about the fact that we've inverted the channel and marketplaces sit at the front end. I think personally that marketplaces will become the enabler for better partner-to-partner engagement. They won't replace the channel the same way the internet didn't replace, sellers talking to one another and working together to drive an outcome.
Yes.
And I think in the same way, the marketplace will become the vehicle that we will drive, or the object that we will drive the customer to. What it helps to facilitate, though, is it streamlines all the work that was happening. So these SaaS software companies, working with Microsoft as an example, could be AWS or Google, they are doing their thing over here, their selling motion, which includes all the processes that take you from the top of the funnel down to the bottom of the funnel. And then there's all this paperwork that has to go back and forth between the organizations to make a transaction happen, to record a transaction, to attribute it back to a Microsoft, so that their people get paid. Well, a lot of that gets eliminated or gets streamlined quite a bit through the marketplace concept. And what we're finding is that the vendors are recognizing that it's not just one organization that's selling in the marketplace, it's going to be multiple organizations. So we've been working with some of the best in class in terms of saying, okay, we're going to get these two solutions or these two vendors together, and we're going to bundle a solution in the marketplace. And then we're starting to see that happen quite a bit, and we're going to see more of that happening in the future.
Great. And what about verticals or industries? So I know there's a lot of talk about medical. There's been a lot of talk about Google Medical, and you mentioned it before, or healthcare, or however you want to define it. Well, what are you seeing at some of the key verticals or industries that Microsoft are hot on at the moment?
Well, we talked about the lines of business, right? Where Microsoft spent a lot of time with the IT purchaser, right? The technology. They sold the plumbing back in the day. They recognized years ago, and I led the public sector partner organization for almost a decade, which included federal government, state and local, education, and healthcare. We were the early industries and with an industry lens. But in those days, we were still selling more plumbing, I would say, but putting a little bit of a skin to it. Now you're starting to see these industry clouds, and Microsoft has focused quite a bit of energy and effort here, engineering solutions specifically for an industry. So they've done this in healthcare, retail, financial services, manufacturing, and the like. And what they're doing is they're driving a set of solutions, and it's partner-led. They're taking their top partners and many other partners, and they're bringing them to this industry cloud approach so that they can walk into the customer and say, this is the product offering. This is the set of solutions that meet your requirements in the line of business, not at the IT shop where I'm bits and bytes, but down at the actual user line of business level. Yeah, and seeing more focus. In the case of Microsoft, they've actually reorganized their sales organization as such that they're independent units. They have a vice president, they have marketing, sales, customer success, solutions technologists, and the like, all focused by industry.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and I do know they also, it's been a while now that I worked with someone that was building, a solution for doctors effectively for, what do you call them in America? Your local GP, your physician,
physicians' practices. Yeah.
And they were funded by Microsoft to develop the solution for, is that still with these verticals? Is that still happening? Are they acting like an accelerator or a venture capital for some of these industries?
Microsoft does have a venture capital arm for early stage SaaS software companies. It does provide funding for those. That's an area too where you've seen some consolidation, at least in the United States, right? There's three big vendors, Epic, Cerner, and McKesson, that have the big electronic health records solutions in those markets. And what you're starting to see too in the United States, I don't know if you're seeing it other parts of the world, is this consolidation of the physician practices underneath the big hospital systems. So the big hospital systems make the 20, 30, $40 million investment in this system, and then these other practices kind of fall in underneath that larger system. So you start to see quite a bit of that in the United States.
Yeah. And having acquired and tried to integrate companies in the past, it becomes interesting if they're all on different systems. You see a lot of partners. If I'm someone who's like, once again, I'm implementing, reselling software at the ground level, right? What should I be looking for when I go to pick a partner? Because, as we said, there's so many of them. Unfortunately, we picked a partner when we had our business, and it was acquired by one of the large ones. Well, I'll call them out, Citrix, and the strategy's changed overnight. And unfortunately, we jumped onto another platform. But what how do I go as someone trying to pick the right racetrack and the right horse and the right jockey in the race? What are some words of wisdom from your perspective on that?
Well, certainly it's like any other vendor strategy, right? Again, I talked about the 5 seats at the table, references, right? How comfortable do you feel with the people you're working with? Yeah. What's their track record of delivery? Does the solution meet at least 80% of what you're looking to do? Can they deliver on time and on budget? And what's their customer delight measurement? Like, what's their how happy are customers? What's their attrition rate? And what are their client scores, right? How are they measured? NPS is the big measurement here in the United States. Net promoter scores. What are their net promoter scores?
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, look, we'll have to leave it there before we go into the deep dive. But people, I'm talking to Vince, and his podcast is called The Ultimate Guide to Partnerships. I thoroughly recommend. And I know at the end of this, you've got a really good asset that people can use around partnerships as well. So we're going to go into the deep dive now. Are you ready, Vince?
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. Well, let's fire this up. So the first one is, what are some daily sales habits that you do to accelerate your sales?
So I've been in sales my whole career. I carried a bag in the early days of my technology career. And, I think it does come down to relationships and trust. I mean, I don't have a magic secret, maybe back in the day when I was first starting out, you say these words in this order and you get an order. Yeah. I became a big fan, though, of Miller Hyman back in my career. Yeah. And strategic selling has always been something that I think I could do what they call a blue sheet. I could probably do it. It's in the back of my head at all times, right? Yeah. So as I think through the whole process of working with an organization, I think about who are the buying influences, what relationships can I develop with, who can be my coach? How can I develop those relationships? How can I turn people from a negative to a positive and move them up to being an enthusiastic sponsor of my solution? And so I use that quite a bit in terms of my methodology and how I think about sales and working with organizations.
Same here. I learned that in '99. I went through the course when I was at Coca-Cola, and yes, and in and out of business. So when I go to buy a house, when I go to do anything that's a major transaction, I pull out the old blue sheet and away I go. I think it's brilliant. So, we've talked a lot about technology, and but what about for you? What are some essential tech that you use to accelerate your sales?
So I use a lot of tools in the work that I do, right? Hosting a podcast requires me to use things like WordPress and some of the technologies that I use around the podcast. But I simply use HubSpot as just a general tool. And I like the fact that it ties in directly into my email delivery solution. And then I go back and I ferret through some of those contacts on an occasional basis. I also use LinkedIn quite a bit. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I'm very active in the LinkedIn community, and I have a newsletter, an Ultimate Guide to Partnering newsletter that's available through LinkedIn. And I find that I do a lot of social selling that way. I keep up with people. I'm able to research them through Sales Navigator and other tools that are available for me. And it's a little bit of a surround strategy, right? If I find somebody, I find out who's worked with them, who knows them, and look for introductions to be successful there.
Yeah. LinkedIn is. I don't know a salesperson that wouldn't be in there every day. It's just it's brilliant. What about the best source of leads? You've talked about LinkedIn, which is social selling, etc. But what's another really good source of leads for you in your business?
I find that people just pick up the phone. I mean, they reach out. I find that some of my best opportunities come. Somebody saw me speak at a conference. Somebody listened to the podcast or saw a post that I did. And the ones where they reach out to me, they're pre-qualified. And I do find that those tend to be very high quality leads for me.
Yeah, well, I think,
I'm not selling. It's the social work I do in front of giving back to this amazing community.
Yeah.
I reap the rewards from that.
Yeah. Sure. And look, you got a very high quality podcast, that then means that you're going to get high quality leads. So you do give back a lot. And like I said, I listen to every episode of yours and are learning as, for me, I spent, most 18 years in the Coke system. And, technology is very similar, right? The vendor does effectively the product and the marketing, and then the partner does everything else. So very similar worlds, but you've really helped me, especially in the Microsoft world, really understand it better. So appreciate that. So I recommend everyone go listen to the Ultimate Guide to Partnerships. The last one's the big one. So what's just one action we can take from today to 10x our sales?
Find great partners. I got into partnering because I hated cold calling, by the way, back in the day. And my approach was I'd get a stack of leads and I'd hand them out to partners and they would pay me back tenfold. Find good organizations to work with. Then you'll multiply your sales efforts tenfold.
Yeah. Well said. Brilliant. So we spoke about it, but if you want the 7 principles to successful partnering, just go to ultimate-partnerships.com. All the links will be in the show notes. I'll talk about that in the outro. But Vince, absolutely wonderful having you on. Thanks for all of the work that you do for the ecosystem, for the industry wide. And great to hear your deeper perspectives on today's podcast.
Paul, thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing here. I love sales. It's like it's in my blood, and so I love the fact that you are providing this amazing forum internationally to help all of us become better at what I love to do every day. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. Bye. I love that interview with Vince. He's got so much wisdom over his 30 years and he shares it so openly. And don't forget to get the 7 principles successful partnerships at ultimate-partnerships.com. Obviously, we're going to have all the links to that and everything else that he shared. And why don't you give him a shout out on LinkedIn? Now, he said he uses a lot of social selling. What's something that you took from today's podcast, implemented, share it with everyone on LinkedIn and mention Vince. And once again, you can find out more at Ultimate Partnerships. So it's ultimate-partnerships.com. And as I've said, there's going to be a summary within the app that you're listening to. There's going to be a more detailed summary. My team do a fantastic job. Just go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/podcast to see those. And also you can get a full transcript as well. And why don't you share it with some of your peers? Don't be one of those friends that holds it. If you know someone is looking and has got interest in this area and they want help to accelerate their sales, please share it with them. Check out the solo shows as well. And don't forget that free community, which is cloudconsultantscollective.com. So next week's guest is Islan Monastiri, and she is a brilliant HubSpot partner, and she's going to be talking about how they've gone about scaling their HubSpot agency. Please, as always, take action to accelerate your sales.
I'm fired up after today's episode. What about you? But hey, before you go, learning is just one piece of the puzzle. Now it's time to put today's strategy into action. Head over now to today's show page at paulhigginsmentoring.com/podcast and share how you'll put it into action. Be sure to head over to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe, rate, and review the show. Tell me what your favorite episode is. And don't wait 1 minute more to gain access to your pulse check at paulhigginsmentoring.com. This could be the difference between struggling to get more leads and making this next quarter your best one yet.